This is the story of Michael, 42 years old, a father, a husband, a man who once had dreams, ambition and fire in his eyes, a model employee, someone you could always count on. But lately, Michael was simply exhausted. Not the kind of tired. That sleep cures, but the kind that gnaws at the soul. It was a Friday. The clock read 6:17 p.m. Around him, co-workers laughed, made weekend plans, talked about soccer games and barbecues. But Michael stared blankly at his computer screen, now black from inactivity. His mind, a thunderstorm of incomplete thoughts. His heart, beating, yes, but without rhythm, without passion. His eyes, empty, like a house where no one lives anymore. At home, bills piled up like unanswered prayers. His marriage had turned into routine. Not toxic, not violent, just distant, cold. His teenage son barely spoke to him anymore. Conversations had shrunk to grunts and shrugs, and Michael began to ask himself the kind of questions that echo in the dark. Is this it? Is this all? There is. Am I just an extra in my own life? He used to be hopeful, he used to be creative, he used to love, but now he was just surviving, and barely doing that. That Friday, as the office emptied and the city lights began to blink awake, a thought entered his mind quietly, like a whisper with a knife. If I disappeared tonight, would anyone notice? And that question, sharp and haunting, lingered. He didn't say it aloud, he didn't write it down, but it was there, in his breath, in the way his shoulders slumped, in the way he avoided his own reflection on the elevator ride down. It wasn't about wanting to end his life. It was about not knowing if it had meaning anymore. He walked past people smiling, holding hands, rushing towards something. And he wasn't rushing anywhere. He wasn't even walking, and he was drifting. Inside Michael lived a man screaming for air. But no one could hear him, because his pain was silent. And that's the thing about emotional exhaustion, it doesn't show. You still go to work. You still pay the bills. You still say, I'm fine, for. But inside, something's breaking, and no one sees it, until it's too late. But for Michael, it wasn't too late. Not yet. Because life, in its mysterious timing, had one more message for him, and it would come not through a miracle or a loud voice from the sky, but through something small, something forgotten, something that waited for just the right moment to be found. Something folded inside his jacket. That night, Michael didn't go home right away. He left the office with no destination, no plan, just motion. His feet carried him more than his will. The cold air of the city brushed against his cheeks. The kind that doesn't bite, just numbs. The kind that makes you forget you're even breathing. The streets were alive with neon signs and Friday night energy. But none of it touched him. He passed by restaurants, couples holding hands, loud music coming from bars. All of it felt like it was happening in another world. He turned corner after corner until he arrived at a part of the city he hadn't been to in years. A hill with a forgotten overlook. A bench stood there, worn and lonely, like it had been waiting for him. Michael sat, not to think, not to feel, just to exist, to let the weight of everything collapse over him without resistance. There were no tears, just an emptiness, the kind that doesn't scream, it settles quietly and roots itself in the bones. He slumped forward, elbows on his knees, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, and that's when he felt it. Something crumpled. He pulled it out slowly, a small folded paper, yellowed at the edges. At first he didn't recognize it, but then as he opened it, the handwriting hit him like a warm breeze in a cold room. It was his son's, a note, years old, drawn in colored pencil, written during one of those Father's Day crafts in elementary school. Dad, you're my hero. I know you work a lot. One day I'll take care of you like you take care of me. Michael stared at the words. His fingers trembled. His eyes, dry until now, finally brimmed over. He remembered that day. He remembered how proud his son had looked handing him the card, and how Michael, buried in work emails and deadlines, had said thank you, and quickly tucked it into his coat. He never threw it away, but he also never looked at it again. Until now. And now, it hit different. It wasn't just a sweet message from a child. It was a message from his child, to this version of himself, a message that waited patiently for the exact moment when it would matter most. That moment was now. Michael wasn't okay, but he was, still here. He still mattered. To someone, to his son, to himself, even if he hadn't seen it in years. The world hadn't changed. But in that moment, something inside him did. It was like someone had reached into the fog and grabbed his hand, not to pull him out immediately, but just to say, "You're not invisible and you're not alone." Michael folded the note carefully, as if it were made of gold, because in a way, it was. And with that he stood, not taller, not stronger, but steadier. It was still a long road ahead, but now he had a direction and a reason to walk it. As Michael stood there holding the note that had awakened something long asleep, a memory surfaced. Quiet, unexpected, but powerful. He was 10 years old, visiting his grandfather's small countryside farm during a summer break. It had rained heavily the night before, and the ground was thick with mud and silence. Young Michael stood next to his grandfather, watching him dig patiently into the wet earth. The boy, impatient and fidgety, asked, "Grandpa, why do we plant things if the rain is just going to ruin it all?" His grandfather chuckled, shook his head, and knelt beside him. He held up a tiny seed between weathered fingers and said, "This little seed doesn't fear the rain. It needs the rain. Just because you don't see what's happening under the ground doesn't mean it's not growing." Michael didn't understand it fully at the time, but the image stayed with him. A small, quiet truth buried in muddy soil. That memory now echoed louder than ever, because that's what he had become. A buried seed, covered by responsibility, exhaustion, self-doubt, and years of silent pain. And like that seed, he had believed he was forgotten, useless, alone in the dark. But maybe, just maybe, he was becoming something. Maybe the silence wasn't punishment. Maybe it was preparation. He remembered his grandfather gently patting the soil after planting the seed, whispering, "You don't dig it up every day to check on it. You trust, you wait, you let it break open in its own time." And isn't that what life often demands of us? To trust the process, to believe that pain has a place, that healing happens in the dark. Suddenly the message from his son's note felt like sunlight, and his grandfather's lesson, the roots. Between the two, Michael found something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of growth, not fast, not dramatic, but real. He thought about how many people live like seeds, buried beneath circumstances waiting to bloom. How many give up? Just days, maybe hours, before they would have broken through the soil. And in that moment, Michael made a vow, not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet promise: "I'll stay, I'll grow, even if no one sees it yet." Because maybe the miracle isn't in the bloom. Maybe it's in the patience, in the choice to stay planted, to trust that beneath all the weight, something sacred is happening. That old farm, that muddy afternoon, that gentle voice from the past, it all reminded him. Just because you can't see the change doesn't mean it isn't real. Growth is invisible. Until it isn't. Michael looked at the city skyline, no longer blurred. Not because the night had changed, but because he had. And it all began with a memory, a story within a story. A truth waiting to be remembered, that no pain is wasted, and no darkness lasts forever. Michael didn't leave that overlook with all the answers. He didn't suddenly have a 5-step plan to fix his marriage, his finances, or his career. But he did walk away with something far more valuable, a shift, subtle but powerful. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. He went home that night quietly. No grand declarations, no emotional speeches, just presence. The next morning, instead of rushing out with his usual mechanical routine, he made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and waited. His wife walked in, expecting silence. But Michael looked at her and simply asked, "Do you want to go for a walk later? Just the two of us." She blinked, a pause, and then a small nod. It wasn't a solution, it was an opening. Later that afternoon they walked, at first awkwardly. But step by step something softened. The walls didn't come down in a crash, they melted. He didn't need to fix everything that day. He just needed to show up. That night he knocked on his son's door. "Hey, I found something today. Thought you should see it." He held out the note, the old one, the one his son wrote when he was still little. His son took it, confused at first, then smiled, a real smile. And for the first time in months he said, "I remember this. I meant it." They sat on the edge of the bed and talked. Not for long, not about everything. But it was a start. Michael realized transformation doesn't come like lightning. It comes in inches. In a smile, a sentence, a decision to keep going. He started arriving at work a bit earlier, not to bury himself, but to breathe before the day began. He left his phone down during dinner. He said no more often to things that drained him. Not perfectly, not always, but more and more. And with each small act, something inside him healed. Because that's the truth no one tells you. You don't rebuild your life in a weekend. You rebuild it one honest choice at a time. Michael started remembering who he was. Not the tired version, not the lost version, but the version who once believed. And maybe, just maybe, that version had never left. He'd only been buried, like a seed. And now, he was growing again. To anyone watching, Michael's life looked the same. Same job, same house, same clothes. But inside, there was light again, hope again. A quiet fire that whispered, "You're not done yet." Michael's story isn't a fairy tale. There was no dramatic climax, no magical fix, no applause. But there was something better. A choice to keep living. And maybe right now that's where you are. Maybe you're sitting in silence, wondering if anyone sees you, if anyone would notice if you vanished, if anything you've done has meant something. So let me say this to you directly. It does. You matter. Your story is not over. You may feel buried. You may feel forgotten. But maybe, just maybe, you're in a season of becoming, like a seed beneath the soil. No one sees. The roots breaking through, the silent battle beneath. But one day the bloom comes, so before you give up, pause. Before you disappear, to breathe. Before you believe the lie that you're not needed, remember, someone somewhere is still holding on to a version of you that changed their life. Sometimes the smallest spark, a letter, a memory, a walk, is enough to relight the fire. And you don't have to see the whole path, you just have to take one step. Because healing is not loud, growth is not obvious. But both are happening, right now, even in you. So stay, try again, ask for help, say what hurts, start small, but start. Because maybe the breakthrough isn't far, maybe it's one sunrise away. You were never meant to bloom overnight, but you were always meant to bloom. And no night, no matter how long, can stop the morning from coming. If this story touched something in you, share it. Someone else might need it too. And tell us in the comments what helped you keep going, even when you were ready to give up.